Hey guys, last time we talked about the distinction between form and content so that we're able to abstract and think about claims in terms of symbols. And at the end of the last lesson, we talked about how in the following lesson, which is this one, we would start talking about symbols in terms of whole arguments instead of isolated claims. And that's what we're going to do. To be more specific, we are going to be looking at 4 valid argument forms. What does this mean? Well, first of all, since these argument forms are valid, you know right off the bat that we're working strictly with deductions, with deductive arguments, right? Because validity is not a quality that applies to inductive arguments. So we're talking about deductive argument forms. And when we say that these are valid argument forms, we mean to say that the structure is valid. We mean to say that the structure is such that the conclusion necessarily follows from the premises, regardless of the content of the premises in the conclusion. So it doesn't matter what exactly is said, what exactly the argument is about, if these general formulas or structures or forms are followed, the argument is automatically valid. Okay? And there's going to be 8 total that we discuss in class before we then discuss some invalid argument forms. But today we're just going to look at some of the most basic 4. So the first type looks something like this. The first premise you would say, all right, if P, then Q. Right? If antecedent, then consequent. Now, in the second premise, in this proof or in this form, what you're doing is affirming the antecedent, right? And don't get confused because that actually sounds like some fallacies we'll be talking about. But the thing you're doing in the second premise is confirming that the antecedent happens, right? So if someone gave you these 2 premises, if P then Q, P, what would follow? And the answer, of course, is Q. Now this is like the most basic valid argument form, and it's called, it's Latin, modus ponens, shortened as MP. Now, any argument that takes this form is going to be valid. So maybe you say something like, if it's raining outside, then I'll have my umbrella. In fact, it's raining outside, therefore, I will have my umbrella. Doesn't matter that it's about rain or umbrellas. The point is you can put anything in there, right? If I go to the show, I'm going to throw up. I went to the show, therefore throwing up. And it could be something wacky, like if it's raining, then I'm going to go outside with no shoes on. It's raining, therefore I'm going to go outside with no shoes on. Doesn't matter how wacky it is. It doesn't matter what. Remember when we talked about wacky examples that are still valid, like all toasters are made of leather. All leather objects can time travel. Therefore, all toasters can time travel. And we said that was valid, even though it might have not been sound, because validity, once again, is concerned merely with the relationship between these 2 things. Same thing here. So that is modus ponens. Always valid, always valid. Another argument form that's similar to modus ponens looks like this. Say, whoops. It starts off the same way. The first premise is a conditional statement. If P, then Q. Okay, easy enough. But in the second premise, instead of affirming this antecedent, you're going to negate the consequent. Not Q. What follows from that? Well, let's think about it. What a conditional statement means is that if P happens, Q has to happen, right? That's the condition. There's no such thing as P happening without Q happening. But the second premise says Q's not happening. Therefore, it must necessarily follow that P is not happening. Why? Because if it did, then Q would have had to happen, but we're negating the possibility of Q happening, and so in doing that, we're negating the possibility of the antecedent happen. So if we write this out, because this one maybe is a little less straightforward, and use the rain example, which is always the easiest for me, you say, if it's raining, and just shorthand, because I don't have space, I'm going to say then umbrella instead of then I'll have my umbrella. So if it's raining, then umbrella. And what you hear is you're saying not umbrella. And so you're concluding, oh, it's not raining. Why? Because you're saying if it's raining, I will have my umbrella. And you have to take these things literally, because sometimes when the students are new to this, they're tempted to be like, but how do you know? Maybe they're lying, or like maybe it won't happen. No, that's not the kind of thing this is. We're looking at this purely mathematically, like, so you believe it, right? And the statement is, if it's raining, then I'll have my umbrella, which means just that. But you're negating you're negating having the umbrella, so you have to negate that it's raining. Why? Well, because if it's raining, I have to have my umbrella. If you know that I don't have my umbrella, then you know that it's not raining, because if it was, then I'd have my umbrella. You see how it works? And you could plug in anything, like, if I go to the store, then I will buy pants. I don't buy pants, therefore I didn't go to the store. Or, if the album comes out on Tuesday, then I'll listen to it. I didn't listen to it, so it didn't come out on Tuesday, right? And very interestingly enough, you can play with the negations here. And you could always do this. So in, and hold on, wait, the name of it, I probably should tell you that. This one has a similar name. It's called modus tollens, or MT for short. The first one was MP, this one is MT. And in the first one you said if P, then Q, P, therefore Q. You can change that up, so you could be like, if not P, then Q, not P, therefore Q. Or if P, then not Q, P, therefore not Q, for modus ponens, right? And you can do the same thing in modus tollens, because all you're doing here is you're negating whatever the consequent is, which means if you're starting out with a negative, like if P, then not Q, then the way you negate the negation is to make it positive, right? Like the opposite of a thing is not the thing. The opposite of not the thing is the thing. So if P, then not Q, Q, therefore not P. Same thing. Because you're saying if P happens, then not Q has to happen. But Q is happening, so P is not happening. And you could always make these things longer too, right? Like you could, let's do, I'll pause on that because I don't want to get you confused. Let's go through all these first. So you have modus ponens, and then you have modus tollens. Third one actually refers to one we talked about in the video last time. So let's say you say either P or Q, and you say, oh, not P, what has to follow? Remember, we're using the exclusive or, which means it's one thing or the other thing. Has to be one of them and only one of them. We know it's not P, therefore it has to be Q. And you could play around with this too. Like you could say, P or Q, not Q. And you're like, oh, so it has to be P. And because we're using the exclusive or, you can take this, in other ways and say P or Q, P, therefore not Q. Or P or Q, Q, therefore not P. Like it doesn't matter, right? Because it's one or the other for our purposes. Not everyone, sometimes you deal with inclusive or, and that's not the same thing. But what is this called, by the way? This is called, and this is easy if you remember what type of statement this is. Either or statements are what? Disjunctions. So these are called disjunctive syllogisms. Or DS. Right? It's one thing or the other thing. It's a disjunction. The basic ones up here. Right? So either I'm buying the Roku or the Apple TV. I'm not buying the Roku, therefore I'm buying the Apple TV. Apple T. And you could do the same thing over there. And that's what a disjunctive syllogism is. And again, doesn't matter what it is. Tonight I'm making grilled cheese or soup. Not making grilled cheese, so I'm making soup. I'm either going to use my money to buy a new guitar or I'm going to invest it. I'm not buying a guitar, so I'm investing it. Like, it doesn't matter what it's about. This is always a valid argument form, again, because the conclusion necessarily follows from the premises, right? In other words, this can't not follow if these were true. Okay. One more I want to talk about. And this one kind of gets us thinking about a chain of events. So far we've only dealt with two variables, right? P and Q. If P, then Q. P or not Q. P or Q. We've only been dealing with two variables, right? But let's invoke a chain of reasoning that deals with three variables. So you say, okay, if P, then Q. So it's a conditional statement. All right, we got that. Then in the second premise, you say, if Q, then R. So we've introduced a third variable. What follows from that? Right, so you're saying, if this first thing happens, then a second thing is going to happen. And if that second thing happens, then the third thing is going to happen. Therefore, what would follow in the conclusion is this connection between the first term and the last term. If the first one happens, then the third one's going to happen. So what you would say is, if P, then R. So if we hang out later, then I'm going to wind up talking to you about this argument I had. And if I talk about the argument I had, I'm going to get really mad. Therefore, if we hang out, I'm going to get really mad. And this is called a hypothetical syllogism. So we did the disjunctive ones. This one's a hypothetical one. And you can also call this HS. There's an easy way to remember this, right? Like one of the things I always say in class is that I think students sometimes take words for granted. And we have to realize that, this is going to sound stupid maybe, or not, things are named certain things for a reason. So it's not like random, you're guessing, oh, this one is this one is this. Like, no, the proof like is in the pudding, right? Like it's giving it away in the name. So a disjunctive syllogism, you should know because you're like, oh, it's the one that utilizes a disjunction. What's a hypothetical? If, and what is this argument made entirely of? Hypotheticals. Right, so a conditional statement has this hypothetical aspect. And so a hypothetical syllogism is one that is made entirely of these hypothetical conditional statements. If I drink water, then I'll be hydrated. If I'm hydrated, then I could live another day. Therefore, if I drink water, then I'll live another day, right? Or if I go outside in the snow, I'm going to be cold. If I get cold, then I'm going to wrap my scarf tighter. Therefore, if I go outside, I'm going to wrap my scarf tighter, right? Anything like that. And as I was saying, this is the form, but you could play with the specific variables. So if we go back to, let's stick with this. Let's say we make it a little more complicated. We say if P, then either X or Y. You say, okay. Then we say, okay, if X or Y, then R. Right? And so the conclusion would be the same. You're saying, if P, then R. Right? Because you're still connecting the first term to the third. Or you can make it a little more juicy. Maybe you say something like, if A and B, then not X. And, if not X, then either W or R. All you got to do, don't make it complicated for yourself. You're just connecting the first and the last term. So you're saying, so if A and B, then W or R. Right? Same thing. If P then Q, if Q then R, therefore if P then R. It's the same form. You're just adding a little more substance to it, so to speak. And that's the 4 forms I wanted to go over today. They're the most basic ones. Next class, we're going to be looking at some other ones which aren't much more difficult. Some of them are kind of weird, but I think these are the most straightforward. And again, always remember these are valid argument forms, which means A, that they're deductive, never inductive, and B, that they are valid, unequivocally, universally, regardless of what they say within the letters. Because the mathematical form, so to speak, is follows, right? This necessarily follows from the premises. That's it. If you guys have any other questions, hit me up, send an email, or come to office hours. I'll see you around.